Hello everyone, welcome to my weekly writing Q&A. This week's question is from Mary Knight. She asks, my question based on your experience is this: if one has only recently become decent at writing very short stories, is it better to continue with that only, or is there another type of writing the individual might pursue? So this is a good question. Basically, I think what she's asking is are short stories good practice? And I think the shortest answer is, if you're wanting to write short stories, they are fantastic practice. And if you're wanting to write longer form fiction or something else, then in some respects, they are good practice. And in other respects, not so much. So I used to write, I've written hundreds of short stories in my life. That's kind of how I started out before I got into longer form fiction. And in my experience, I think that they are fantastic for teaching you certain things. I think number one, discipline. If you're writing, showing up and writing lots of short stories, then you're learning, to sit down, to get the time in, and to just train your body and your mind to sit there and concentrate and work with the words, which is, the first and foremost requirement. And secondly, they're great for prose, learning to write good prose, learning what works as far as sentences and pacing within the prose. They're good to a certain extent with character development, although that is different in some ways when you get into different mediums. So I think that and the other thing about short stories is that they are in some ways less intimidating than longer form fiction, just because you can complete them so much more quickly. A good short story is a masterful thing that is by no means easy. And in my opinion, short stories are harder to write and write well than our longer form fiction, because you have so much less room for error. It's like every single piece has to sing and work, and you have to just get it right. If you're really going there and wanting to write really good short stories. So I'm by no means saying that because short stories are less intimidating, that they're not actually just as hard, if not harder, than other mediums. But just because they give you kind of that confidence of, I can finish something, like I can sit down, I can write a beginning, a middle, and end, and do it multiple times. I think there's a tremendous boost of confidence that can come from that. However, at a certain point, if you're wanting to write novels or something else, then at the end of the day, there is no training for that can be replaced then by simply writing novels, because that is an art form in itself. Just as short stories are an art form in themselves, so is the novel. And there are certain, techniques and skills that you can pretty much only develop in the writing of a novel. So pacing is completely different in a novel. Character development is the bones are the same, right? As you're dealing with a story arc in all instances, and also with character development. But depending on the type of short story you're writing, it might be just, one scene within this person's life, rather than building, the development over many scenes. And understanding how to flesh that out, how to create the beats of character arc and sync them with story structure in a way that's much more drawn out. That's, in my experience, something that you really are going to learn best by actually exploring the form that you're interested in writing. So yeah, I think that it's important to understand that they are different mediums, just like poetry. Poetry is completely different, right? But you can learn all kinds of things from writing poetry that you can apply to novels, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, they're two separate animals, and to really hone in and perfect either one, then you really need to practice the one you're interested in. Which is also not to say you can't write both, I think it really just depends at the end of the day which you're most interested in. If you enjoy writing short stories, write those. If you're wanting to write a novel, then I'd say there's absolutely nothing, stopping you from jumping in and doing that now. People will sometimes ask me, should I save my best idea for when I'm a better writer? And there's a time and a place for that. I kind of did that actually with the story I'm working on right now myself. But in general, I would say no. Write what you're most excited about. Write what motivates you right now, because there will always be more ideas. There will always be new experiences that you want to have down the line. So I think short stories are fabulous, but so are novels. And both, at the end of the day, are an education in themselves. All right, so if anyone has a question for me next week, leave it in the comments on Instagram or YouTube, and I will answer one next week.